Hi guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. So greatly appreciated, truly is. Before we start, let me give you my usual disclaimer that this video is for educational purposes only. Please do not take what I say as fact. Please always do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Next, if you have not liked, subscribed, or commented yet, please consider doing so. It really helps me out and I really appreciate it. It literally takes a couple seconds. Lastly, if you have not watched part one, I would highly suggest you do that before watching this one. So watch part one and then come back to this because I'm literally just picking up where we left off. So with that, let's get started, okay? In March, just 2 months after the birth of Desi Jr., Lucy goes back to work. In June, they were named Husband and Wife of the Year. Combining Lucy's last pregnancy and a full work schedule begins to take a toll on her. And Lucy begins to develop a feeling that she can't really shake. When she would have to tear herself away from her babies every morning, she would get this terrible feeling that something bad was going to happen to them while they were gone. And I get that because I went through that, but I feel like it's probably magnified in her world because it took her 10 years to have these babies, really. So it had to be awful for her, awful. Desi managed to cut down their work week to 5 days a week. But this also meant that on weeknights, Saturdays, and Sundays, people were going in and out of the Arnaz home to consult Desi with deals. At the peak of their popularity on I Love Lucy, Ball continued to feel guilt-ridden and anxious. She felt as though she didn't deserve all of the love and admiration that she was receiving. I don't know why. She definitely deserved all of it. She couldn't believe that her two beautiful babies were really hers, and she feared on a constant basis that something terrible was going to happen to them. At the peak of their popularity on I Love Lucy, the 25-mile commute was becoming a lot. So Lucy and Desi decided to sell the ranch house and buy a home on Roxbury Drive in Beverly Hills. They gave away most of the furniture from the ranch, and Lucy bought all brand new furniture from a furniture store in Jamestown, New York, that she had flown out to her on a private plane. Good for her. They spent 6 months remodeling their 5-bedroom, 5-bathroom Beverly Hills mansion. Then in March of 1955, their home was finally ready. Little Lucy and Desi were super excited about all the neighborhood friends that they were going to make. Then 2 months after moving to Beverly Hills, they finished the 4th season of I Love Lucy, and then they did a movie together called Forever Darling. But that movie was a flop. Desi played a scientist working on a new insecticide, and Lucy played a screwball wife. In the spring of 1957, Lucy and Desi finished the last of the half-hour I Love Lucy shows and signed a $12 million contract with Westinghouse for a series of monthly 12-hour-long comedy specials. The following year, they would negotiate the sale of 179 I Love Lucy shows back to CBS for $5 million. In the spring of 1959, Lucy and Desi took their 2 small children, aged 7 and 6 at the time, along with their nanny and her husband, to London in an attempt to rekindle their marriage. Desi spent that trip uncommunicative, restless, and bored. When he wasn't drinking, he spent most of the time on the phone with the studio and checking the Del Mar racetrack schedule to see where his horses were running. Lucy and Desi would return from that trip not even on speaking terms. And after they arrived back in California, Desi moved into the guest house, and then he went abroad again for several months, this time alone. Lucy realized that her and Desi never really liked each other. Rather, they just had a strong attraction to each other. Lucy disapproved of how Desi worked hard and played hard. It was one thing when it was being kept behind closed doors, but once it became public, she knew that she could no longer be publicly embarrassed. And Desi's treatment of her in the public was just too much for her to bear. He was cheating on her a lot. Allegedly. She says in her book that you can't go on for years being miserable in a situation and expect for it not to change you. She's so right. When she got to that point, she could no longer stand herself, so she decided to divorce Desi once and for all. During this time, Vivian Vance was going through a divorce with her husband, Phil Ober, so they were a huge support system for each other in their time of misery. In 1960, Lucy and Desi were completely estranged from each other, and having to still act and direct on the show became super awkward. In one of their last shows on the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour, not I Love Lucy, Lucy plays a geisha girl. Her face is covered in white powder and her eyes were red from crying. Every time she looked at Desi, she could feel her expression hardening. She says that she could literally feel her hate for Desi oozing out from her pores. She couldn't bring herself to ask Desi for a divorce. She wanted him to be the one to ask her for the split. Shortly after filming this episode, Desi asked Lucy for a divorce, and she had a lawyer in his office 20 minutes later, citing the reason for the divorce being extreme mental cruelty. March 3rd, 1960. Lucy and Desi filmed the final episode of the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour. And this would also be the final time that Lucy and Desi would appear on television together. In this episode, Lucy tries to get Ricky on a TV show and wears a chauffeur's cap and mustache to disguise herself. In the final scene, Desi is supposed to pull Lucy in for an embrace. He knew that this would be a difficult scene, and he confessed later on to having difficulty getting through this segment. Not only this, but they also knew that this would be the last time that they were ever Lucy and Ricky. Desi would later recall the scene saying, "As we got to it, we looked at each other, embraced, and kissed. This was not just an ordinary kiss for a scene in a show. It was a kiss that would wrap up 20 years of love and friendship, triumphs and failures, ecstasy and sex, jealousy and regrets, heartbreak, laughter, and tears." The only thing we were not able to hide was the tears. After the kiss, we just stood there looking at each other and licking the salt. Then Lucy said, "You're supposed to say cut." After this, Lucy threw herself into work doing a movie for Bob Hope called The Facts of Life, where Lucy and Bob Hope played old family friends who found themselves on a vacation together and end up falling helplessly in love with each other. They shot this movie at Desilu Studios and used the same Studio 12 that they used to shoot I Love Lucy. Awkward. Shortly after she finished The Facts of Life, she flew to New York to film a new musical called Wildcat. While filming Wildcat, Lucy's friend, Paula Stewart, suggested to her that they double date with her boyfriend, a man named Jack Carter, and his friend, Gary Morton. Gary says the first thing he liked about Lucy was how she walked head up like a thoroughbred. She started jabbing at him, asking him what he does. Gary was a nightclub performer, and he'd never seen a single episode of I Love Lucy, probably because he was always backstage at a theater or supper club. At the time, he had been a stand-up comedian for 15 years in the United States, England, and Australia. He told his family that he wanted to be a variety entertainer and that if he didn't make it in 5 years, that he would come back home. But he made it in 3. Gary drove Lucy home that night, and not long after, he asked Lucy to be his girl at a dinner table with 6 other people there. About 7 months after meeting, Gary was asking Lucy to marry him. Her mom told her that she better not let this one get away. So, Lucy, being the mom that she was, she asked her children how they felt about it. And they asked her if Daddy would care, to which she responded, probably not. So after dating Gary for 11 months, he proposed to Lucy again on a plane to New York. Before their marriage, Gary spoke to Lucy's lawyer without her even knowing, and he offered to sign papers giving away all of his rights to her money. Basically, he wanted to be with her because he loved her, not for any kind of financial gain. That's love. I should have worth a lot of money. November 19th, 1961, Lucy and Gary marry. Their entire wedding was planned in only 5 days. They only invited 40 people to the wedding, and they banned all photographers and media cameras. But when they walked outside of the church, they were shocked to see 1,000 people jamming the streets of Fifth Avenue to send love to them. Of course they did. Right? Lucy and Gary honeymooned in Beverly Hills with the kids for 5 whole months. The following March, Desi talked Lucy into doing a television show without him or William Frawley. Lucy refused to even consider doing another show without Vivian Vance. Since I Love Lucy had ended, Vivian had gotten remarried to a literary agent named John Gobbs, and they soon began their series together. During this, Desi was still the head of Desi Lou and the executive producer of The Lucy Show. Being on set with Desi and Gary proved to be too much for her. And after running Desi Lou for 11 years, Desi was ready to retire. So in November of 1962, Lucy bought Desi out for $3 million. That seems like she got a good deal, right? Sounds like she got a good deal. March 2nd, 1963. Desi Arnaz married Edith Mack Hirsch at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada. The duo met 3 years after his divorce from Lucille Ball and married just 6 months later. Desi and Edith were married for 25 years before she succumbed to cancer on March 25th, 1985, at just 68 years old. It's young. Just 1 year later, on December 2nd, 1986, Desi passed away after losing his battle with lung cancer at the age of 69.
With his redheaded comedian wife, Lucille Ball, in I Love Lucy, one of the classic television series.
I can say that he died with me in my arms and that we loved him very much. I can tell you not to smoke, and I can tell you that I would like him to be remembered as the man who was responsible for Lucy, the I and I love, and that he loved all of you very much.
Desi was diagnosed with lung cancer, and while his daughter cared for him at home, she called her mom to let her know the end was near.
And so I said, do you want me to put the phone to his ear? Would you like to say something? And she said, yes, please. Yeah. I leaned down and I put it up to his ear, and I could hear her say, I love you, like 5 times in a row. And he heard it, and he was nodding his head, and he said, I love you too, honey.
Unknowingly, they'd had that final conversation on their wedding anniversary, and Desi passed away 2 days later.
Just 3 years later, on April 27th, 1989, Lucille Ball passed away from a ruptured abdominal aorta at just 77 years old. She was getting extreme pains in her chest, so her husband and her daughter forced her to go to Cedars-Sinai Hospital. Once there, she underwent a 6.5-hour surgery to repair her aorta and replace her aortic valve. She had successfully recovered from the surgery, and she was eating and walking around her hospital room, so she was sent home. Which is protocol, really, right? The following day, she woke up with severe back pain and lost consciousness. Her aorta had ruptured again, and she went into full cardiac arrest. She was rushed back to the hospital, but the doctors weren't able to save her. Ronald Weiss, a spokesperson for Cedars-Sinai, told the Los Angeles Times, Ball has suffered a complete heart failure at 5 a.m. And after several minutes of resuscitation efforts by the doctors, she was declared dead. Following her wishes, Lucy's body was cremated and her ashes were interred in the Hollywood Hills Cemetery in Los Angeles. Then in 2002, her children moved her ashes to the Hunt family plot at Lakeview Cemetery in Jamestown, New York, which is where I went, which if you are a diehard I Love Lucy fan and you have not gone, you need to go. And then when you're there, make plans to go to Niagara Falls because it's like an hour away. Go. I'm telling you. Where her grandparents and her parents were buried and where her brother's ashes were also interred.
I Love Lucy was a permanent fixture on CBS Monday night. Last night, there were 3 services for friends and fans to show their love for Lucy. In New York, more than 1,000 people attended a service at St. Ignatius Loyola Catholic Church. At the request of the family, television newswoman Diane Sawyer spoke and remembered Lucy's everlasting humor.
I know there is laughter in heaven because a God who would have created her would never let her laughter be far from home.
In Chicago, Mayor Richard Daley was among those at a memorial service. And like millions of her fans, he remembered growing up, his family gathering around the television set, watching Lucy. And in Los Angeles, family, friends, and fans alike gathered to remember the Queen of Comedy, who died April 26th. One of the speakers was the Reverend Robert Schuller.
And I think she did more good in her lifetime of humor than probably most, if not all, of the sermons of the preachers put together.
Afterwards, Lucy's daughter, Lucy Arnez, says she was glad her mother's fans got this chance to say goodbye.
I think she would have loved it very much. And she lived her life for the people who were in that room tonight.
Again, Lucille Ball died today in Los Angeles of heart failure. She was 77. She underwent heart surgery last week, but her death came as a surprise because she had been making a steady recovery. Dennis Michael looks back at the redhead who we all knew simply as Lucy.
Lucille Ball was a pioneer in the television industry, and her first show, I Love Lucy, is one of TV's great success stories. Begun in 1951 and backed by Lucy's own money, it never fell below 3rd place in the ratings, and on special programs like the night Lucy Ricardo gave birth to a son, the show became a national event. Even now, it is an international institution, still broadcast to audiences in virtually every country in the world. Not only was and is the program phenomenally popular, but it also ushered in the use of videotape and the 3-camera shooting system that is still in use today. Lucy's last public appearance occurred on Oscar night. She appeared as a presenter with Bob Hope. Last week, the comedienne was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles for open heart surgery to replace her aorta and aortic valve. The comedienne was reported on the mend and besieged with get-well wishes. The bad news came Wednesday morning.
Lucille Ball sustained a full cardiac arrest this morning at approximately 5 a.m. It was unexpected. She was in an intensive care unit at the time it did take place, so the response was instantaneous, and doctors and nurses worked on her, but they were unable to revive her.
Expressions of grief were heard from her contemporaries.
I just spoke to her husband, Gary Morton, the other day. Said she was feeling fine. But what can you do? The guy knocks on your door and gives you back your pictures. You gotta leave.
And from her colleagues.
So no matter how many tears we cry today, the laughs outnumber them. I love Lucy.
Bob Hope, with whom Lucy worked many times, said on hearing of Lucille Ball's death this morning, God has her now, but thanks to television, we'll have her forever. Dennis Michael, CNN from Hollywood.
Okay, guys, if you're still here, thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you so, so, so very much. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you haven't yet. Really, really helps me out, and I would really, really appreciate it. And until next time, stay safe out there.